You must gain balance within yourself before you can bring balance to the world. Guru Patik. Bending, Not Breaking. Season 7, Episode 13. The Last Stand. And welcome back to another episode of Bending Not Breaking. I'm Sunshine.
And welcome to our last stand.
I'm gonna get emotional. Don't say things like that.
Well, certainly the last stand for now. But
for now, the final episode.
Final countdown.
Get your tissues ready.
Goo goo.
And what an episode. Yeah, for those who haven't put the pieces together, which is fine. This will be we set out to do both Avatar and Korra when we first started this project almost 5 years ago. And this is the last episode of Korra. And so for us, it is a natural somewhat of a progression to kind of step back and take a little break. Indefinite break. Who knows when we will return? And there will definitely be some content here and there, especially as new shows come out and things like that. But the final run of the entire series canon of Avatar: The Last Airbender universe ends with this episode. And so we're going to use that as a time to also end our podcast for the foreseeable future.
Certainly as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Just we'll see. There's a lot of possibilities, but yeah, we're gonna figure it out from there.
We've grown a lot. We've learned a lot in 5 years. We've hopefully been better people throughout the 5 years.
Certainly,
as that was the point. And also, we hope that we grow. And so, Ben is about to be wrapping up a master's program for 2 masters and start the next chapter of his life in the near future. I have gotten married and am moving into a home with my wife, so very excited for that. And so it's just as a nice little it's a nice time for us to be able to kind of say, hey, we've loved every aspect of this for the last 5 years. And it is just the natural time to kind of step away.
Yeah.
And so the final episode today, and just as we initially were planning on doing for each season, but ended up kind of scrapping that, our lens today is balance.
Yeah.
Which is fitting.
Yeah, I mean the whole show is about balance. How do we find balance within ourselves? How do we find balance between the physical and spirit world? How do we find balance? And it's just a really neat paradigm for us to kind of come back to as we look at this episode, but also kind of look backwards.
The series as a whole, yeah.
And kind of just take in a little bit more than perhaps just this episode. This episode does have a lot of fight in it, so it's good. It's good.
You finally get to do a recap of a fight episode.
They fight, the end. That's the recap. We're done.
Before we get to the recap, let's dive into the lens a little bit more.
Yeah.
Ben, what is balance?
You know, I did some etymology research, and it stems from weighing 2 things against one another. But to me, in a way, that feels reductive for what the word means, because it's only weighing 2 things when balance is on so many different levels, weighing against and counterpoints, and it's not any 2 things. They may be 2 big things that you're weighing against, but also something weighs more because of something else, and all of the things contribute to a myriad of things that we are trying to do well and recognizing that in order to do all of those things in a way that is healthy and productive and good, it requires that we be very intentional about where we spend our time and how we do that. So I was thinking about it in terms of breaking it down. I want to be more balanced with X, Y, or Z. And I was thinking about how one of the things that is potentially helpful in terms of a framework to consider is, how do I do that on various levels, including but not limited to the physical level, the social level, the subjective level, so like my identity and how I view myself, the temporal level, so on a time frame, what changes over time, on a spiritual level. And so all of these different things give us aspects that we want to consider the balance of something on. And I think that that's something that we'll kind of think about, right? Like Korra over time has become more balanced, right? And what does that change in terms of her physical, like, right? In her balance, when she was imbalanced, she lost a lot of body weight, right? And then she bulked back up. And so there's just a whole lot of things that are really interesting when you consider it on different levels, and how, as we balance, certain things go certain directions and certain things go other directions. What I miss?
I think you nailed it.
Nice,
I think you
nice.
nailed it. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly interesting to, when you think about just Korra as a character from start to finish, when things are in balance, how all of those things intertwine with each other, right? When one thing happens, how it affects the other.
Yep.
She didn't just lose body weight and mass when she went to kind of into recovery. She also lost connections and friends,
Good. Yeah.
um, and familial relationships and purpose in the work that she's doing. And so
And her
it's
identity,
interesting.
right?
It's interesting how all that um plays into each other. And
Yeah.
so
And I think they are way more interrelated than we think they are. And
100%.
and that's why it's sometimes it's like it can be difficult to diagnose what the issue is when you're only paying attention to one of those aspects. For instance, if you're only paying attention to the physical, you might miss how that is connected to the social. You might miss how that is connected to her identity and how that is shifting. And so when we start to put those things in conversation with one another, all of a sudden we see how balance is way more interconnected than we think it is between just one thing and another.
Absolutely.
Dun, 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 dun.
Ben, let's jump into it. You got 30 seconds to recap this episode.
You agreed, since you were the one, backing off and moving and all the things, that you were going to do
On your
this.
mark, get set,
Nope.
go.
Nope. Korra and the team spread out and they take out the Platinum Giant, and Sue and Lynn take out the weapon, and Kuvira removes the arm, and then Mako and Bolin are awesome, but zap zap, and then Korra fights Kuvi, and then Spirit Ganon go boom, and then Korra saves Kuvira and creates a spirit portal, and then Kuvira surrenders, and then Varric and Julie get married, and then Wu plans to dissolve the monarchy, and Tenzin gives a pep talk, and then Korra and Asami take a vacay and hold hands.
Nailed it with 5 seconds left.
Woo! I mean, that's it. That's it. That's what happened.
Korra and Kuvi fight.
Yeah. Kuvi surrenders. Yeah, that's it.
And so that's probably one of the easiest things to talk about balance, is Kuvira's lack of balance in her mission and purpose, right? Like it becomes very one-sided in what she thinks she wants and how she has to have it, and not taking other perspectives into it. There is zero balance.
Yeah.
In
Well,
Kuvira's fight.
it's interesting, right? The framework, when I was watching it, I was using the language of doubling down. Like Kuvira, like when the platinum mech thing falls initially, Korra's like, give up, that's the end. And she keeps on fighting and doubles down, and then runs away and gets the spirit cannon ready to go. And I think about people who double down rather than apologize and retract, right? And to me, doubling down seems to be a potential flag for loss of balance. And it's hard to recognize, right? Because it's this idea of the like a sunk cost fallacy, right?
Mm-hmm. I've
Where
already lost this much in it, so I can't pull out now.
exactly. And it feels like that is a good sign of, if that's the language you're using, perhaps that's a signal that you're making a decision out of balance, right?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, I can't think of a time where I've like doubled down like that and it is truly like benefited the situation.
Yeah, it's
Um,
yeah.
Short of maybe like poker, right? Every now and then, but even then, most of the time, it doesn't work.
Yeah, but I mean, even that's like a risk. Sometimes you just lose twice as much by you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
100%.
and I think this is a really interesting moment to kind of witness, because the other thing that's really interesting is I think when you contrast that with Korra, who has been regaining her balance this whole season,
Mm-hmm.
and finally steps into this episode being like, no, I know what I'm like supposed to do. I know what my purpose is. And what we find is, I don't think Korra could have done what she did with the spirit cannon at any other point in this season,
No,
right? I think that she was able to do that because of everything that had happened so far. And I hesitate to say this, but I think that includes the trauma of the end of last season,
mm-hmm.
right? I
Well,
think
because she lifts that up, right? She lifts that up in the conversation with Kuvira and says, this is what I've gone through. And no, I haven't I'm not an orphan, but I have dealt with things and learned from them.
beautiful empathy moment, right?
Yeah,
Oh, and it's like, and that's one of those things where you don't ever want to be like, look at what the good came out of your trauma.
correct.
But that it is true that Korra was able to grow in a way that she probably could not have without having gone through that healing process.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not at all a glorification of like, go get hurt and then heal and then you'll be better. That's like, I I fundamentally disagree with that as a premise.
Well, because that requires a level of resilience that you're not guaranteed.
Yes.
Like, but
Yeah, but
but
it's
she
just
really does.
contrast them. Sorry.
No, she really does just show up in a way that is so kind and so
Yeah.
um why didn't you I would have never saved you, right? Why are you saving me?
Yeah.
Um and
Yeah.
it's because she's making decisions from a balanced place.
It's really interesting. Um, I'm now in 3 campaigns for Avatar Legends, which is really great. I'm having a lot of fun. Some with our Patreon supporters who agreed to join. I'm in one with my friends, and then I'm also in one with a bunch of strangers. So it's just a complete thing. The reason I'm bringing it up is the mechanics of the role play hinge on playbooks, and each playbook has 2 values that they are trying to balance between. And so, you can lose your balance. And when you lose your balance, you do something outside of your values and run away from the scene. Or you double down and like cause something problematic and then run, like, you know what I mean? So like there's a lose your balance moment. But what I also find interesting is there is a moment of balance move that is like your character's special move.
Mm,
And when you are in balance, that is the only time that you can use that quote special move. And I think that what we see Korra doing is she has been out of balance, out of balance, out of balance. And finally, she's in this balanced state and she's able to do this moment of balance, so to speak. And that's kind of like, just to think about how that would manifest, this is a really interesting way that it did. And so I find that really neat. And don't know what that says about real life, but I think that it's like I guess what it's suggesting is you can do extraordinary things when you are in balance, right? With your integrity, with your values, with your et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And it's interesting to think about how this plays out from a social standpoint, because at this point in the season, Korra is very much in community, right? For the last few episodes, it has very much been we're supporting each other, we're doing this as a team, we're doing this as a group. The airbenders are coming in to help. Versus Kuvira, who really is on her own pedestal and really acting inside of zero community and really just herself. Now there's a lot of folks that are a part of the mech guy, and she's got her army, and I'm going to argue that that's not the same as collaborative discussion in those moments, right? Like you're not getting a lot of that from Kuvira. And I think that that's to me, that for me, that is a sign of a lack of balance. Like how intertwined in community am I when I'm making large decisions and getting the input of others and getting feedback from others? Like that is something that I think is a red flag as we're talking about red flags for balance. When I'm not in community,
Yeah.
there's a red flag for me.
Well, you know what's interesting, just to kind of extend that too, is past the scene where they're all fighting, but in balance, Korra is able to have conversations that she wasn't able to have before. For instance, she apologizes to Asami. She has a really beautiful conversation with Mako. This beautiful platonic conversation of love between them. Like, and there's no hard feelings because it's like, no, I get it. There's a lot of it. There's an extension of grace. Like the things that have happened in that relationship have been processed thus far. And it's the same thing with Asami. The things that had happened have been processed and they're able to move on. And I find that that's an extension of her balance in the social realm, right? She's like not only able to work well with everyone and create a cohesive team, but it also manifests in the sense of like she's having conversations that she couldn't have before, you know? And I think that that means something.
Oh, very much so. There's so much um to be gained from apologizing and saying you're sorry and having all of these moments of closure that are
Yeah.
just really really beautiful. And I think that we are seeing a Korra that is so has shown so much growth since
Yeah.
kicking down the baby door and saying I'm the avatar, deal with it,
Yeah.
which I
And
love that moment too.
and well, and I think that's what's so beautiful about Korra as a series is that we see her grow up, right? Like we don't see get to see her the first 16 years of her life, but we see her grow up in the sense of like from this like cocky, arrogant young lady who is super badass and powerful and knows it to someone who is like, I don't know if I know anything. And I think I have a lot of room to grow and I have a lot of learning to do. Like that was what she said to Tenzin, right? Like I don't know that I'm done learning. I don't know that I'm done growing. Um and so it's just the complete shift there is just fascinating. It's and it's beautiful. I'm tearing up just thinking about it because that's just it's amazing.
One, because some of the best leaders that I know are the ones who that's where they're at, right? They're in the place of, the more I learn, that there's so much more to learn,
Yeah.
right? Versus those who are like, I've got it, I know enough, I'm good at it, right? There is such a maturity to that answer, is the acknowledgement of like, I don't have all the answers, but I'll work to find them and learn them from others.
Or from Avatar: The Last Airbender and talking about it and then doing that for 5 years.
That's correct. There's so many times where I'm like, I'm not an expert in any of this. Right? Like
Yep. Yep.
And
Man.
we've been very grateful to have so many folks come on this podcast over the last 5 years that are experts who, we've just learned so much from so many folks. So I recommend going back and listening to
Just start over.
to start the whole thing over.
Yeah.
Maybe skip season one.
Yeah. Like, oops.
It's a rough audio session for that one.
Well, we got better equipment eventually.
We did. We figured it out a little bit, I think.
We became more balanced.
Um, what are other moments from this specific episode that are nice? Varric and Julie.
Yeah, I think that was, I did you notice in the wedding, by the way, that the waiters were dressed like Nuktuk?
Yes.
I,
Hilarious.
I was like, what?
I love Bolin as the officiant.
Yeah, well, that was interesting too. And it's what like say more. Why did you like Berlin as the officiant?
I think that shows there's growth for him, right? I think that it speaks to the relationship that he's built with Varric over time, I think.
Yeah.
I love the moment where he's like not as equals, right? Like not as an assistant, but as equals going through life together.
Yep.
Which I think is just a lovely acknowledgement of what partnerships can be.
Yeah.
I just and I Bolin's funny. There's times where he's annoying, but he's funny, and I think he probably brought just a lot of joy to that ceremony.
Yeah. I mean, I found him fun. Um, yeah, I think that it's interesting to I don't know how I feel about weddings generally, but the idea of exchanging vows is a really interesting concept because it's essentially this I promise to do X, Y, and Z. And one of the things we've talked about before on the podcast is when you have to, promise where like the element of trust versus the need to promise versus the ritual of doing it. And there's this weird, like, it makes me feel interesting. Especially when, what is happening is Varric is writing very interesting vows, right? Specifically around, the calluses on his feet and things along those lines. So I'm glad that Bolin was like, no, I'm not reading this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that comes from a little bit of balance on his part, perhaps.
I think it does. I think it has to, right? The balance of life that comes with being in a relationship with someone it's an incredibly difficult thing to navigate. And requires balanced decision and balanced perspectives and the acknowledgement of your wants and others' needs and how they mesh together. And so I hope for a happy life for Varric and Julie.
Me too. Me too. The comics give a little, but not a lot.
Yeah, I still have never read Turf Wars.
There are more coming out, so it's okay.
Good to know.
Yeah, the other thing that I find interesting is I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the opening of a new spirit portal.
Yeah.
Like there are already two. They're symmetrical, like they're on both poles, like the North and South Pole. And now there's this one, which is not symmetrical. And so there's a question of like, what does balance mean? And is this creating more balance, or is this a rupture that is, like, so I have a question around whether this was overall a good or not good or just is thing. I have trouble putting judgment on the opening of a new portal. Did you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it is just it exists now, right? And so it happens. It's there. There's now a new spirit portal, and so I think the question is, yeah, from a planetary standpoint, what does balance look like in that terms? But the more doors we open, I'm generally in favor of keeping our doors wide for things, right? For more learning and for more experiences. And I think that that's what this portal does. Um, it also allows for a nice little date.
Sure does. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think that there's I mean, any sort of major change like that is obviously going to cause issues, right? With the opening of a new spirit portal, that means that there's going to be a much greater relationship necessary
Mm-hmm.
between the spirit world and the humans,
Yeah.
because right now the one in the South Pole is very difficult to reach, right? There's a constant storm. And then in the North Pole, it's again very far from most population in the Northern Water Tribe. And so it's like out of reach. But in Republic City, it's right smack dab in the middle of like essentially what is the equivalent of New York, right? Where it's like there are people everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to demand a whole lot of new a new normal regarding what balance looks like, right?
Yeah, very much so. And I think that that's probably the bigger takeaway for me is there are things that will happen in our lives that are absolutely out of our control. Um, that we just don't have decisions in and that we don't have the ability to change. And so finding balance in those moments and finding how to engage with those things in a balanced way becomes the mission. And so I think that that's what Republic City will have to figure out is how to maintain that portal into being something that is productive for all involved.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that they'll have to figure out how to balance that with the spirits. Um, yeah, if you get another Unalak,
Yeah.
like what is
Uh-oh.
the access to that area is now very easy.
Yeah.
Um, what does harmonic convergence look like with a third portal? I don't know. So,
Yeah.
um,
I don't think anybody does, right?
so
Like,
so I think just like anything else, like bad news in life or the need to move cities or big changes that are out of your control sometimes
yep.
you gotta find the balance within that. And so that's not an easy thing to do.
No, it is not. I mean, and the goal, I think, is just how do we constantly pay attention to all of the various components that we are hoping to balance, right? And it's recognizing that on any given day we're not going to be able to, right? And on like today I can focus on really getting a few chores done around the house, but that doesn't mean, okay, what do I do about rest, or what do I do about schoolwork, or what do I do about uh how I see myself. What do I do? Oh, I didn't do any sort of meditation today. Like that, like all of these things that we're trying to do and balance. And it just means that like if I don't do well in some of those areas today, I need to prioritize those moving forward because I was able to prioritize something else yesterday or today. Um, so I mean, it feels like balance is something that when we are in balance, we feel it across all of the different like realms that we consider. And it feels like it's going to be a constant on the boat where it's like ebbing and flowing, and I'm constantly maintaining balance and in motion rather than being still. Like, does that make sense? That's a
Oh, very much so. Because to me, I'm getting imagery of like seasons change, right? There are some seasons
yeah.
where things are really easy, and there are some seasons where they're not. And what balance looks like in winter is different than what balance looks like in summer versus what balance looks like in fall. And so that's part of finding that balance is to understand the things that you need to fill your cup that allow you to pour into others. And some weeks that's going to look different than the week before. And you have to just gauge that and what that looks like.
Yeah, it's actually reminding me. So I'm taking a class on death, dying, and grief. And
Fun.
yeah, it's very fun. But one of the things that we kind of have been talking about is the concept of wayfinding. And rather, the paradigm for grief in popular culture is like the 5 stages of grief. Um, and it's like that's not how grief works, right? Grief is very not stage oriented, it's not linear, it's not any of those things. And it's kind of like being out in the ocean on a boat and you have to figure out where to go in the middle of nowhere and you don't have any tools and you're like, I don't know what to do. And eventually, um, you're going to recognize that, okay, the current's pulling me this way. When I move this way, I get more traction. And you start to like learn skills and build things in the middle of nowhere, and you start to gain tools in terms of, oh, when the sun is over there, that means X, Y, and Z. um, there's a Polynesian people that do a lot of wayfinding, and when they go sailing and when they go out on their boats, they're able to see things that we can't see because that's all they do. They're able to see islands that are underneath the water because the current looks different to them, and the clouds form differently over land versus over water, and they are able to see that. But to me, as the untrained eye, I'm sitting here going like, I couldn't tell you the difference between that cloud and the other. They look like clouds, right? I know the difference between like stratus, simulus, or cumulus, etc.
Nimbus, yeah.
But like even then, I don't even tell you, like, who knows if I could point to it and name it. But moral of the story is, what if balance is not something that like, here's the tool and you're going to be balanced if you do this. It's hey, you're going to have to find your way. And there are tools that can help you, but no tool is going to fit every situation. And sometimes you're going to have to learn something new in order to balance, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of how it feels.
Certainly. And I think that that's what, we've been doing on this show for the last 5 years is
Yes.
how do we gain awareness of what could be tools, and, you know, what does that look like? But again, no, that's not going to work in every situation. Every situation is nuanced and different.
Yeah.
The people you're in relationship with are nuanced and different. And so, again, you're going to have to figure out what balance looks like to you. And again, that's going to change on a daily basis, as it did for Korra. Korra had to find out a
Sure
lot of
did.
that stuff by herself.
I'm going to
And
learn
she had
today.
support, and it still was, she needed to figure that stuff out by herself.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. And then there's people like Tenzin who are just beautiful mentors who are just like, you have done more in the past few years than most avatars do in their lifetime. And recognizing that and giving her praise, and like, there's pride. It's just what a beautiful moment with Tenzin. I'm just really grateful for that.
There's always been so much learning from Tenzin.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about people who are willing to kind of admit mistakes, there's a lot of times where he models that really well.
Yes.
And again, some of the best masters are the ones who are able to say, like, I messed up. I didn't know the answer.
Yeah.
And I don't, but I'm going to find out, right?
Yep.
A lot of good balance for Tenzin.
Absolutely.
And he's had a lot of growth from the way he thought that air benders needed to be season 1
Absolutely. Yeah.
to now. And so there's just a lot of growth from them as well.
Yeah.
Any other moments that you want to lift up?
No, I don't know. Like I think again, most of it's fighting. So like there's not too many, but I think that just lifting up that, Asami looks great in that red dress and rocks it. And Korra is rocking a really lovely relationship starting here.
Oh, just a just a beautiful moment. Walking off into the portal together.
Yeah. Look at that.
Oh, tears. It is a lot of fighting. So much fighting. And
Indeed.
good fighting. It's good. This was the music kicks in at so many moments in this episode that I just am like,
Gotta play that at full volume.
which is like that's absolutely going to be one of my tweet. I think part of my tweet in law is just like the score for Korra is
Yeah.
just top notch. You can't say it any more than we are saying it, and it is just so good. Like, Korra is my favorite series, I think, between the two.
Yeah, it's hard because like it's really you need both. And I think I prefer watching Korra. I think I prefer watching Korra. I think you're right. But that's a spicy take. It's a spicy take. Um, but that's the balanced take.
It's the balanced take. That's right. That's the one that's balanced.
We're making the claim.
They're both good. The right answer is
Yeah. Oh man.
when I say that, like we were going back and watching like season 2 of Avatar, and that's also just so good. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Our live episode covered the drill this past week. And what a great episode, right? There's a lot going on in that where you see everybody work together and it's so good. So good. So good. So good. Um, yeah, I think one of the things that I guess a question that lingers for me is as we think about, our time and the things that we've enjoyed and the things that we have done. I'm curious for our listeners too, if there's been any standout moments over the past like 5 years or conversations where we're like, wow, that was really something, or and there's a few for me, but I'm curious if as you ponder the fact that this is coming to a close as it currently is, what moments for you are like do you return to? Like, are there episodes that you're like, man, I still think about this regularly, or just favorite moments at all?
oh, I really loved our conversation with Casper or Kyle around ritual. I
Yeah,
think that drastically shifted my viewpoint of traditions and was a really cool learning opportunity. I think having Cricket on the show was fantastic.
absolutely.
She's been on more than once, and I think those are the moments that our guests were here. I think are some of my favorites. Right,
Yeah,
being able to learn from folks and different perspectives. I think that's always being able to do this podcast in community has always been a really lovely aspect of it. And so, Max has not been with us. He is still alive, but he has not been with us.
it
For a few years now, a few seasons, and ultimately, that was always a lot of fun having him around,
was.
producing as well. And I think that those are the moments that I really latch onto, just really, nice conversations with good people. And I think that was always one of the kind of favorite parts that brought me a lot of joy through this process. What about for you?
Yeah, no, I'm reflecting on the first time Indira was a guest. And she introduced herself and we're like, hell yeah, like this is what we've been wanting for our guests. And we're so grateful that she's been able to kind of come back again and again and again. And that's been huge, I think, building that relationship and me being able to kind of learn from her as she kind of is a few years ahead of me in the same in a very similar process has just been really a beautiful gift. And I'm grateful for that. Having Cameron, I really, I'm thinking about it. I still reflect on our conversation with Alex Vitale too
Mm-hmm.
on policing. That was a really interesting episode
That was.
where I felt like I learned a lot. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of really cool moments that we've just been kind of blessed with having done this.
Well, and I think one of the coolest aspects of being a part of this community has been just the the outpouring of folks who just have felt something special with these shows, and um being a part of this fandom is definitely has its ups and downs, but I think we just met so many wonderful people. And then I also, it's amazing what people can pull. We've had some guests on here who never watched the show, and then
Yep.
we invited them on, and now they've crushed the whole series, right? So like, I think
Yeah.
that's also been a really cool aspect of this podcast. It's just the joy that I think it brings
Yeah.
people, and hearing people lift up why they like certain episodes. There's certain conversations, and being able to do the live episodes with other folks that we were talking about that on our last live episode, that we've almost been doing the live episodes for 3 years at this point. And you just think about like an hour conversation, hour and a half conversation monthly for 3 years is a lot of time with people, right? Like that's and so that's cool as well.
It is. Yeah, I think it's absolutely worth shouting out Rahul, Kelly, and Maggie, who are consistent attendees at our live episodes. And thank you for supporting us for so long and for continuing to just be a part of the community and growing to be our friends as we talk about Avatar and just have a great time. And I appreciate you showing up every time. That's been a real gift for both of us.
Absolutely. Oh man. Well, I mean, do we take a break and then come back for our twee and law?
Guess so. I guess it's time for the music.
All right, we'll be right back with our final twee and law devotion and gratitude. All
Well,
right,
back.
we are back.
We did it. We took a music break. And then the music died.
Ugh.
So what? Huh?
What?
Huh? Twee and Law. Twee and Law. Nooks and crannies.
No, we're not doing that. You really? Ugh, gross.
So good. It was so
No.
good.
Mm-mm. I
I,
can't. I can't believe you did that on this. You ruined this last episode.
it was totally worth it. I don't regret it at all.
Gross. All right.
Oh,
What is pushing you away and pulling you in?
yeah, I mean, I think I touched on this earlier. I think, if you're going to go through the ritual of a wedding and go through the ritual of exchanging vows, I feel like, there's a solemnity that I kind of like would want to impart into that moment. And, you know, Varric's not so joking things. I'm like, that doesn't seem like that's the best time to crack that joke if it is a joke, or it seems tactless and thoughtless. Like, yeah, I don't know. It felt weird. It might be a thing that's super cool for them, but for me, not a fan.
There was a viral video that went around recently on like TikTok and stuff where it was a guy making a lot of like sexual references
Yeah, not the
in his
place.
thing. And I mean, people like were like at giant red flags. And even the wife was like, no, it's totally cool. This is just our relationship. And so part of me is just like, I mean, I get cool, I guess. And it just felt like it took away from a
Well, and
lot of that kind of there's a real power to being able to be in a wedding, or like a real powerful presence of like
yeah,
being in weddings and seeing weddings, and there's a lot of joy, and that just was a moment that was like that stripped a lot of joy for me as someone who had to watch it.
Well, and it's just one of those things where it's like, if that's the kind of thing, maybe that is something that you do in private, if that's something that you love and like enjoy between one another. But like, you invited a whole host of people also that may not view it the same way. And there's also an element of like, it's your wedding, do whatever you want. Like, like I'm just a guest and this is your deal. So
So
it's
that's the point. Yeah, that is the little bit of like the what's the point of the wedding? Like,
exactly,
what's the
yeah.
is it for y'all? Is it to celebrate the community supporting y'all? Like, what's the purpose? And did you live into that well?
So for me, my judgment, my little bubble is like, I didn't love it. For other people, like you do your thing. But for me, no, thank you.
Yeah. I think part of my push is these are kids. Like I have to remind myself that
Still,
like
yeah.
these are kids from Avatar to Korra. Like these are kids that are having to do these things, and I'm really wishing we were living in a world. Granted, this is a fictional one we're talking about now, but like where kids don't have to do those things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
That would
that's a push for me.
that would be great. They're technically adults now, but
When this started, like
yeah, when like in the series they were 17, but like now they're 21 in this season. And so like it's just, even still, they are still very young. It's like they just graduated college.
but the pull in really is, I mean, all of it.
The rest,
The
yeah,
rest
the
of it.
rest of it, yeah. I mean, you said it all again. The music, right, is just unreal. It's so good. It gives you chills. Like it just hearing the theme, just woof. I'm done. It's so good. Yeah. I I also really loved this moment with Mako and Korra. I thought this like really beautiful love between them is just lovely to watch. I really enjoyed it. That was something that I really appreciated.
Yeah, I like the moment of Mako and Bolin's little brotherly moment that happens
We didn't
in the
talk.
mech suit.
Gosh, Mako like going zap zap, right? Like that was a decision.
Hmm.
Man.
Uh, Lin and Su Yin's like working together. It's just those there are really cool moments throughout this entire series and episode, but just they write good television.
Yeah, they do it. They do well. They do this really well. Yeah, for sure. Oh man. So Twee, La, we're kind of finding our balance there. Um, and now we're going to talk about the last air devotion.
Let's see what you did there.
Yeah. Uh, air is our element and balance is our lens. And we are setting an intention. And this intention is something that we're going to focus on for theoretically the next week. But we are also going to recognize that setting goals and setting intentions is something that we probably want to keep doing past this too. It's a practice that has been not just connected to the podcast, but a practice that has, benefited us outside of it as well. And so, Sunshine, as you think about your last air devotion, what are
Yeah,
you thinking about?
I'm gonna breathe.
You,
I'm
you.
gonna I'm gonna breathe. No, this is like doing this podcast has been a ritual for a long time. And so part of finding the creating the moments that fill my cup inside of this podcast and how do I ensure that I continue to do all those things, right, that you kind of lifted up. Um and so it's just going to take some time and awareness to figure out what really gives you flight, what really moves the air beneath your wings. So I think for me, it's probably the toughest intention to set, because it really is just like, how do I find the new balance in the next adventure? And how do I ensure that I'm still practicing gratitude and setting intentions and being intentional in that new adventure? And so I think that's, for me, breathing is kind of a joke, but it's also kind of not, right? Like, taking time to breathe, taking time to take a deep breath, taking time to really think and be intentional about, where am I showing gratitude and where am I setting intentions and how am I treating others. And um it's just something that I'll have to keep doing. And so I think there is just kind of a nice reminder, and hey, take a deep breath
Mm,
and all right, go.
yeah.
And so I think that's kind of my intention for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
What about you?
I hope that you find that. That'd be ideal. Um, I think one of the things that doing this podcast has kind of given me has been this, we kind of have separated our devotions and segmented them into elements, right? And that has been what this element with this lens gives us a different thing. But if we had picked a different element on any given lens, it would have been different, right? And recognizing that air is just one facet of the balance that we can be thinking about. It helps break it down and give us a little bit more structure, but it's one of those things where, like, the sensitivity to the elements and how they can shape us requires awareness, and that awareness requires attention, and that attention is a form of love, right? I feel like attention is a form of love, to put it simply, right? And when we are attending to, and what we are giving our attention to is the way we love that thing. And for
Hmm.
for me, as I think about paying attention to all of the different elements that I contain, it's a form of love, and that balance is what comes from that love, right? And so in a way, balance and striving for it is a way of loving myself.
Hmm.
And I went from A to B to C to G to get there, but like it was one of those things where I think that we are compelled to continue to work on ourselves. And I think that um, until that becomes a habit, like breathing, that we don't have to think about, it is one of those things that's going to require us to continue giving it that attention that it requires. And so
Hmm.
that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about just recognizing that this is bigger than any one element, right? This is bigger than any one lens. It is really focusing on how do we hone in on these little details that really make up a much larger whole, and continue to scrutinize and work on and become who we want to be in the most loving way. So that was a long-winded way of saying I'm gonna keep doing this and try to do it in outside of the podcast.
Yeah.
Right? Woof. Ugh, which brings
Gratitude.
gratitude. Who is a character in this episode that you are grateful for?
I'm just gonna go Korra.
Yeah.
Um, the growth, the empathy, the leadership. She crushes it this episode in the series. So I just very grateful for her.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. What about you?
I'm grateful for a lot of them. I'm grateful for Tenzin. We talked about it. I'm grateful for
Yeah.
Marvel. We talked about it. I'm grateful for, gosh, I'm grateful for Sue for not like attending to Kuvira's feelings when she turns herself in and like saying you are going to pay for what you did, right? And not like, she's blunt. And I think that this is a situation where like catering to like, oh, thank you for turning yourself in, it'll be okay. No, it's not okay. Like, so I'm grateful for Sue. I'm grateful for, I'm grateful for everybody. It's just what a good series.
I'm willing to take whatever punishment I've earned. Yeah, you murdered a lot of people.
It's not going to be good.
It's been a lot.
Yeah.
You've done a lot. You might be locked up in a tree for a while.
Yeah, you might be locked up.
Well, and I'm grateful for you, Ben. The 5 years of this podcast, I think, we were friends before it. I think we are better friends now because of it as well. And just grateful for the curiosity that you've allowed for me to bring to the table every week. And just the I very much cherish these conversations. And so thank you.
Yeah. You heard it from Sunshine, folks. If you want to become better friends with someone, start a podcast and
for 5 years talk about your favorite cartoon.
5 years talking about your favorite cartoon. Oh man, yeah, Sunshine, I'm so grateful for you too. We talked about this the other night, and you kind of lifted up feeling like I don't feel like I contribute that much. It feels like you're the one. I'm like, no, I felt the complete opposite. Like, I very much cherish everything that you bring. You are someone who has changed the way that I think, and you have given me greater insight into so many things that I would not have been able to do by myself. And it is only with our powers combined that we were able to do this.
Captain Planet.
Some Captain Planet. So, Earth, Wind, Fire, Water, Heart.
Now, though I won't be here, Ben has promised to do every episode of Arcane and Full Metal Alchemist.
Whoa! I have not.
The original and Brotherhood. And so get excited for that.
So long.
Get excited for his one-man shows on all of those series coming up.
I made no such promise, but we've talked about those.
Full Metal would be another good one to do.
I agree.
That is just not something that I'm able to take on at this time.
Yeah.
Not at this time.
Not at this time.
Well, y'all, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being a part of this for the last 5 years. For those who have started listening and then maybe left for a little bit and then came back, or for those who just listen to any part of this, any of the 201 episodes we've done so far. Just incredibly grateful for y'all, and thank you so much for allowing us to do this. This has been something we've really enjoyed, and it's been great to hear your feedback and your voicemails and the kind things that y'all have done for a while. And so any more feedback that you'd like to share, feel free to send it to the arkofe@gmail.com. We will be back at some point, I am sure. But for the foreseeable future, it's going to be a little bit of a break. And so I'm Sunshine.
And I'm Ben.
And this has been Bending, Not Breaking. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, bye.